Hello everyone, this is my presentation called Fight Fire with Gasoline, the case of Cameron Todd Willingham versus the state of Texas. The fire. Just before Christmas in 1991, Mrs. Willingham left her husband and 3 young daughters at home to go shopping. During this time, tragedy struck. A fire began in the house. By the time Cameron woke up to his daughter's calls for help, it was too late. According to his testimony, he put the girls down for a nap in their room, and he fell asleep in his own room. He had woken up to his oldest daughter shouting for help. He went to get the girls, but the hallway was covered in flames, and the air was mainly smoke. He claimed that he thought the only way to get to them was from the bedroom window, so he ran outside. From there, the occurrences have been debated. Mr. Willingham was accused of starting the fire and purposely killing his girls. He was found guilty in 1992 and executed in 2004. This case is an incredible example of how unethical actions can lead to such unfortunate outcomes. For this case, it seems as though everyone involved added some unethical action, or gasoline. The unethicality in this case begins with the witnesses. Many witnesses were involved in this case, predominantly for the prosecution. It became evident that multiple scene and character witnesses had changed their stories as the case developed. For example, a neighbor, Diane Barbie, originally claimed that she had witnessed Willingham breaking in windows, screaming, and trying to get his children before she went back home to call for emergency services. Later, she stated that she had come to realize that Willingham did nothing to show that he was really trying to save the children and did not act like a normal person should act, even though she was not at the scene for most of the incident. Her daughter, however, was there the entire time and stuck to the claim that Willingham had desperately tried to get his children. Another witness, a police chaplain, George Monahan, had also changed his story. Initially, he said Willingham was inconsolable and uncontrollable as he tried to save his children. Later, Monahan described him as too emotional and had a gut feeling that Willingham had started the fire. Of course, these changes of stories happened after Willingham was suspected of starting the fire to purposely kill his children, but there is no evident motivation for why the stories would be changed. Yet it is unethical in relation to the fact that witnesses were told about the case and evidence against the defendant. More importantly, the key witness, jailhouse informant Johnny Webb, was the most critical part of the prosecution's case. In Webb's statement, it is said that Willingham had admitted to Webb that he purposely killed the girls in order to cover up abuse from their mother. There are many reasons why this allowance of his testimony is unethical. First, Willingham did not know Webb, so why would he admit that to a stranger? Second, no one else was there to hear the statements as well. Third, in a similar manner, jailhouse informant for the defense was denied the ability to talk, as no one heard the statements that Mr. Webb said in which he purposely lied about Willingham in order to secure a deal with the prosecution. Webb has since admitted and retracted his claim that he did lie and was on many drugs. The expert witnesses also poured their own gasoline on this fire. Neither of the mental health experts talked to the defendant, yet gave their opinions on his mental health based on decorations in the home. For instance, the Iron Maiden posters shown was a major point of interest in Dr. Grigson and Dr. Drawer's testimonies. Dr. Drawer was also a personal friend of many members on the prosecution team. Dr. Grigson, also known as Dr. Death, has his license revoked due to unethical actions he's taken in other cases. It was proved that Dr. Death would guess his findings based on what he has quoted, saying, "Just tell stuff about people." Manuel Vasquez, the arson investigator on this case, was a very popular investigator who had completed many cases. Some say this experience has led him to become closed-minded, especially in this case. His assistant on the case believed that Vasquez seemed to make up evidence basing it on his belief that Willingham was guilty and he needed to prove it. Personally, I believe Mr. Vasquez's most unethical action was that he used his personal opinion in his testimony on Willingham's guilt, rather than speaking the science. He has since retired after others had been wrongly executed based on his evidence. Both teams in this case caused a lot of ethical injustices. The prosecution team failed to inform the defense on a lot of their evidence, such as a deal made with Johnny Webb. The prosecution also chose experts that they had personal relationships with. As far as defense, Mr. Willingham had little chance. A former state trooper, David Martin, and a lawyer who accepted all types of cases, Robert Dunn, were his defense attorneys. From the beginning, they believed that their client was guilty. While they did attempt to perform some defense for their client, it is evident that they let their bias get the best of them. The defense failed to properly cross-examine the witnesses, bring in their own experts to test or discuss the evidence, and emphasize the importance of the eyewitnesses and character witnesses that they did bring in. Therefore, they failed ethically in not fully defending their client. Publicity was the main reason why the prosecution chose their unethical actions. This case was incredibly public, and majority of the people believed that Willingham was an evil child murderer. The lack of ethical decision-making by the defense was caused by the lack of motivation that they had to defend their client. Most importantly, our justice system has completely failed to act ethically in this case. For 12 years before he was killed, Willingham applied for as many appeals that he could possibly get. Despite significant amounts of evidence proving his innocence, Willingham had been ignored or denied by all the different organizations. However, Mr. Willingham did manage to get District Court Judge Charlie Baird to rehear the new evidence and original case facts. This judge agreed that Willingham was innocent and had even written a judgment, but was prevented to publish this exoneration by the Third Court of Appeal by reasoning that this retrial was improper. The Texas Governor Rick Perry has been asked for help over many years. Governor Perry denied these requests, once stating that Willingham was a monster. He was a guy who murdered his 3 children, who tried to beat his wife into an abortion so that he wouldn't have those kids. Person after person has stood up and testified to facts of this case that, quite frankly, you all aren't covering. Despite all the evidence given to him that showed Willingham's innocence in the house fire, Governor Perry has chosen his bias and pride over the more ethical solution to allow a retrial. Governor Perry has also prevented furthering of the investigation led by the Texas Forensic Science Committee by replacing a third of the board members that were supposed to hear a critical meeting just after the change was enforced. Many believe that this is abuse of his power, which is very unethical. In fear of public retaliation, Willingham was denied appeals while still living. After his death, his family and friends are continuing to get an exoneration, but due to politics and bias, that unfortunately has yet to happen. At first, it is believed that Perry refused to help in order to gain a better standing in his election against his competitors. His continuing disregard of allowing a man to have justice despite the seas of evidence is based on his ignorance and pride. His parents, never doubting his innocence, spent hours driving to see Mr. Willingham as often as they could while he fought for his freedoms. His friends, old and new, have brought attention to his case and even helped show evidence that proves his innocence, despite the fact that he has already been killed. The most important friend in the fight for his freedom is Elizabeth Gilbert. She met Willingham via a prison pen pal service. At first, she, like everyone else, thought he was a murderer. But she grew more and more curious about his case and looked into everything, from the evidence, the witness statements, courtroom scripts, and even performing her own interviews. Despite raising awareness of all the flaws of the case, she too was unable to convince others to exonerate Mr. Willingham. Finally, much after his death, an organization finally came to the aid of Willingham's friends and family, the Innocence Project. It is important to understand that it required many other cases using the same original experts that were shown to be unethical in order for the Innocence Project to know about this case and to help with this ongoing fire. This is important because it shows that these people made unethical choices that affected so many others. Unfortunately, Cameron Todd Willingham has yet to be posthumously exonerated. Much to what this slide says, Willingham should not have been killed, and his exoneration still being fought for nearly 3 decades after the trial. The evidence and testimonies of new experts that show the failures of the original experts should be taken seriously. The prosecution should never have withheld information regarding their primary witness. The defense should have fought better for their client despite their own personal belief. The court system should have allowed an appeal long before Mr. Willingham was unjustly killed. Thank you all for listening to my presentation. It has been a pleasure to be a part of this class, and I sincerely wish you all the best in your endeavors.